This is a demo of the list open files utility that exists under most Unix-based systems. List open files is pretty self-explanatory, but it has a lot of different uses for looking at which files are open on certain ports, network ports, which files are tied to certain processes. And we're going to look at all three of these. So just for an example, we'll just list the current open files that we can see on the system, of which you can see is just screaming by it at a very fast pace here. There are many, many files that are open by default in the system, but we're going to look at ones that we care about. So right now I am logged into my home directory on my system. As we can see, if I print working directory, I am under home Schenk C. Now we can list open files on this directory and see what has this directory open. As we can see, there are a lot of programs that have this directory open as a file. Right now we can see that there is a bash command running. This is our shell. It shows you this is the process ID, and it's being run by me, and it's tied to this directory. We also have SSH run, Xsession, there's GNOME, Metacity, Window Manager, Nautilus, a bunch of programs that we can see. Now let's just go into a subdirectory I have called snmp. I'm going to try to list open files on this one. Again, as you can see, all I'm doing is running the command lsof followed by a path to a file or a directory. As you can see here, there's a very a smaller subset of programs that actually have this directory open. Notice that I didn't really talk about these three columns, and those can have significant importance depending on what you want to do. First, we see the command that's run in this directory, which process ID has this directory open, what user has this directory open, which type it is, it's a directory. And device actually tells you which file system it belongs to, how large it exists on that file system, and what the inode is. Now we're using an ext3 based file system, so we're going to see that the inode is 444187. But every directory can have a different number of files, or a different number of processes tied to it. So that is the example of looking at open files by using just a path on the file system. We're going to do something different. We're actually going to list open files on a port. Now I actually have an SSH server running on this computer, so I'm going to use the -i command here. That tells me I want to look at an internet port. So I had to say colon, and I'm going to put the number of the port. And notice I actually ran sudo here because I have to be root in order to look at this port. Once I type in my password, a bunch of information pops up. Slowly. Let's finish there. Now if we scroll up a little bit, we've got a lot of information, but let's start at the top here. So there's a command called SSH, process ID 1496, and it's connected to another server, another server. These are ones we really don't care about, all of these right here. These are actually SSH commands for port 22 to other systems. But notice there's one very conspicuous line right here. Notice this says SSHD. Now this is the actual SSH server running on the system. It's process ID 5148. It's run by root. I don't remember what that number is, but it's TCP, and it's listening on all of the interfaces on the SSH port. So this tells us which program is actually running on port 22, because it's the listen entry in our list. Now we're going to take this to another level. We're actually going to take this process ID 5148, and we're going to use list open files one more time to look at all the files that a process currently has open. So this time I use the option -p, and I give it the process ID. Now we get a different set of output here. Let's scroll up a little bit. So command sshd, notice these first two columns all have the same data. It's called sshd is the command process ID 5148. Root's going to be the same all the way up and down too. Now this FD column actually stands for file descriptor. CWD I think stands for current working directory. I'm not entirely sure. TXT actually tells you this is the executable code that belongs to this process. And notice that it gives you the path to that executable. User sbin sshd. This is the actual program that is executed to bind to port 22. This file, or this process I should say, has many files open. Notice there's libtls, libkerberos5, libcrypto, and notice all of these cryptography libraries, which makes sense since we're running SSH. And notice too that we see the same listen line that we saw in our previous execution of lsof with the -i parameter for looking at internet ports. So I hope that was useful for all of you for learning a little bit about lsof.